I remember when I was a little child, a tiny child, and I had a eyelet white dress, and I adored that dress. And one time we were about 6 or 7-year-old girls, took me for a walk, and we were going over. And when I saw the church, I thought that was wonderful, that church, you know, the church. And they were going there, and I was thrilled. And then they thought, I suppose, I couldn't walk anymore because I was only just a toddler. And then they come back, and they didn't get the church, and I was disappointed. The first time I tasted gravy, I had baby food before that, I suppose. And I can remember how good the gravy tastes when they cooked roast beef. I cried to go to school. I thought that was a great place, a marvelous place to go. I thought it was like, you know, wonderful. They were talking about school. And I begged to go to school. So I went when I was 4 years old. And in those days, we had a slate. It was a slate, a smooth slate, with a border on it like a picture frame, so you wouldn't cut yourself. And they used slate pencils. And the teacher didn't give me anything to do the first day I went. And I was disappointed. So the next day, I was 4 years old now. The next day I went, Mother told the teacher I didn't have any homework or something like that. I suppose she did. And he gave me 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Well, I copied 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. That's my first day at school. We used to have games. We'd have rings, we'd have songs, we'd have all kinds of games. We'd have catching hands and holding in the ring and dancing around and have someone in the middle. And then someone had to bring that person out and put somebody else in. And we always had something going. In the summer, we'd have a Sunday school picnic. So we all dressed in our beautiful clothes, dressed very best. And we had flowers we got from the gardens. And we'd go to school, and the boys would all have flags, and the girls in their best clothes had flowers. And they went in a parade around the harbor, and the boys sang a hip hip hooray, and they were going with the flags. And the girls with the flowers, and the flowers when we started off, the fragrance of the flowers, so many with the flowers, it filled the room. And because flowers had a fragrance. And my mother was sick, and so I left school for 1 year. That was when the whole world was in a depression all over the world. Father was in the States sometimes doing carpenter work. Carpenters got 10 cents an hour if they could get a job. And I stayed at school for 1 year, and the next year was worse because the world depression was down. There was no money. Even professional people said people had just enough to live on, just a little bit. And the fishery was lots of fish, but they got very little for it. And they had to go the way it was, there was no cash. The union store would take the fish and put it out to the guest fish to Madeira, and then other fishes down to West Indies. It was the less fish, and weigh it and cost higher cost for the good fish, for the Madeira fish that went overseas somewhere. And but you had to take up what you wanted to buy from the union store. There's no cash. We were well off because we had lots of gardens, but it was plain food, very plain. No tin food, no tin milk. Had your own milk, had cows, or had goats. There was hay to make for the animals. There was fish to dry. The best time I liked was going berry picking. I'd go in where the land was burnt on the mountains, and you go there and pick 7 gallons of partridge berries a day, put them on your shoulders in a flour sack, and come home in the evening singing songs and enjoying ourselves, having our lunch with an open fire, with boiling the kettle and sitting around the fire and picking berries. And there was oceans of berries. and we'd get 10 cents a gallon, and that was a lot of money in those days. And the radio was a big cabinet, and these radios were run by batteries in Champneys because there was no electricity. We'd go to someone's house Sunday evening and sit like quiet, like mice, and hear this marvelous thing coming out of the radio, those sounds coming out of the radio. And VOWR was coming over from the church. That's all you had, the church. Only thing was on the radio was church and news. And Walter grew up, and he went as a speaker, and he was on VOWR. That's where he got his first experience with radio. VOWR, the same station.
What was Champneys like in those days?
Well, there's a lot of people, a lot of houses taken down now. There was more people. And when you go to church, the men were fishermen in those days. And my father was a fisherman, a carpenter, and a farmer. And they go out fishing, and when they come to church, the roof had almost come out the church with the singing, with them strong men's lungs and the women. Everybody was strong, healthy. No electricity. There was no refrigeration, of course. There was no washer. There was no technology. That's late. That's really late. There was no indoor flush toilets. There was no washers. There was no television. There was no radio. People made their own fun. There was accordions, and there was dances, and we enjoyed all that. Grandfather had a horse and carriage. The carriage had springs, and there was about, in the back seat there was 2 or 3 seats. I don't know if 3 could sit there. 3 children could sit there anyway. And the seat in the front was for the driver and the horse, and we enjoyed that. And the workmen used the horses and drays. Horse was used a lot. And in the winter there was no snow removal, so the snow was packed down and ran over the mountains, the drifts of snow and everything. Everything was different. There was no paved roads, but the dirt roads were kept and trimmed all the time because there's continual workers shoveling in the dents in it and everything. It was kept smooth, but it was only used by cartwheels or by walking. All bread was made at home. The first bread I made, I was 10 years old, and I got stuck. My hands got stuck. And by the time I was 12 years old, I made the bread all the time, and that was every day, except Saturday and Sunday. The stoves were black iron, and Saturdays they had to be polished so you could see your face in them with a blackening put on the stove and make them shine, and they had to be shined right up, polished. Mondays Mother washed, put it out on the line. Tuesdays she took it in. Tuesdays she took the white clothes, all the white clothes. There was no Javex, nothing like that. So all the white clothes had to be put in the bath again, with a blue tint dye, kind of called bluing or something, and put into make it right white, and then put it out again and dry it again. That's Tuesday, and then you get it in from the line, and you had to there was no electric irons. There was irons put on the hot, and you had to keep a big fire in, because the irons had to be kept hot, and they had to be put on the stove, and it took a long time because it was cotton clothes, and it's hard to iron, but it had to be done just right, and everybody had to be dressed just right, and on Sundays especially. Father had a motorboat with a Acadia engine in it. It used to pop, 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 pop in the morning, go on the ground, and we'd be delighted to get in the boat and go to Trinity. And Trinity was a cosmopolitan town where people from all over the world were there. And then you have on your best clothes to go to Trinity. And people over in Trinity used to wear makeup in those days when they go out. And Trinity was a special place.
And how'd you end up in Grand Bank, where I was born?
Well, Mother wanted me to be a nurse. Or I wanted to be a nurse then when Mother gave me the idea. And I was disappointed when I couldn't get my education. So I had nothing else to do but go do housework. So Mother wouldn't let me go to St. John's. So when I was 17 and a half, I got on the train and I went to Catalina. And that's a town not far from Champneys. And there was electricity there in Catalina, but they had just a black oven with two burners on the top, stood on legs, and that's how you heat the water on those two burners, or else in the coal stove. And I got $5 an hour, a month. And then we had a washer with a wringer on it, but you had to manually use the wringer.
So they were transferred to Grand Bank?
So then I met my husband up there, and that's how Walter was born. My husband was used to towny life, and he couldn't fit in other things, and we were living in her home, and things didn't work out, and I went home with Walter, and then my husband went back again with his mother, and so I went to work. I went nursing as a nursing assistant, and I got my course in the sanatorium with tuberculosis, TB. And I worked for 3.5 years there. I worked in the mental hospital first 6 months, and I worked in orthopedic then about 18 months. And then I worked in the sanatorium for 3.5 years. And where else? And then I went down on the American base, and I worked as a matron at a girls' dorm, and that closed. So I went down to the American Theater, and I worked selling popcorn and candy. And I saw all the shows, the beautiful shows of Ingrid Bergman, Jimmy Stewart, a whole lot of wonderful actors. And then the base closed. So then I went with the agent and firm, and I was there for 3.5 years. And my brother came from Alberta in a little Volkswagen. I was going to Toronto with my cousins was up there. And I went as far as to Montreal in a little Volkswagen, and the shocks were not very good in the Volkswagen. So when we got there about 10 o'clock in the night, I was exhausted. And my aunt said, stay here. My cousin and I went to Royal Victoria because I always heard about the Royal Victoria. And I went Monday, and Tuesday I went to work, and I worked there 7 years. When I was at Royal Victoria, I went to the YWCA, and he taught us how to paint. That was a still life. He just put it up on tables and stuff, bottles and stuff, and I painted it. And that's how my pictures were made. I didn't learn it all of a sudden. I had to do a little bit of trial and error, and I made about perhaps 40 pictures altogether, they're all over. Some is in Australia, some's in the house, and other people got some. I never ever sold any. One time the recreation center had a display of art for the year, and mine was up in display, and I wouldn't sell them. And she said you could sell them a dozen times over. I wouldn't sell my babies. That was my babies. We had wonder. You get in the horse and carriage and go down the country, and the trees when I was small were so big and so marvelous. Everything was beautiful, and everything was an adventure.